Stand up and say good morning.
Thank you for joining us today for the announcement of the introduction of the Executive Justice Bill, which will replace the sentence of death with life without a chance of parole. The governor last week talked about sentencing reform in his State of the State and how it can impact the budget deficit. This is an example of sentencing reform where the state can indeed save a great deal of money. In addition to saving the state money, we are proposing this legislation to respond to the several occurrences of mistaken convictions of those on death row and the possibility of more, the uneven use of death penalty sentence in counties around the state, the lack of evidence that the threat of execution is a deterrent, the racial disparities in death penalty cases, and the general belief that the public believes that justice is served when true life without the chance of parole replaces the death penalty. And life without the chance of parole means just that, locked up for life. We feel it is now time to respond, what with U.S. Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens changing his views from voting to reinstate capital punishment in 1976 to believing the death penalty unconstitutional in 2008. It's time to respond now that Ohio Supreme Court Justice Paul Pfeiffer, one of the legislators in 1981 who wrote the law to reinstate the death penalty, now questions its viability and the way that the law has been carried out. And it is now time to respond because the number of executions scheduled for 2011 lead the country. We are herewith recommending the execution of justice, not people. No matter what we do, we cannot ease the pain of family members who lose someone to terrible violence. However, by eliminating the long process of appeals and the unknown, by having the penalty clear and specific, set soon after the trial, the process does not drag on for years. I would like to point out the magnitude of the cost differential between the drawn-out appeals, burden death penalty convictions, and the sentence of life without parole. Several estimates have been done in Maryland, North Carolina, and Texas that show the cost per death penalty case can be anywhere from $2.1 to $3 million or higher, or 3 times the cost of imprisonment for life. Statistics and further information is available on the Death Penalty Information Center's website. Before I turn this over to my lead co-sponsor and others who are participating, let me end with a mention of a meeting I had with 100 or so Catholic high schoolers last week. They had spent the previous 24 hours dealing with the subject of capital punishment and witnessed the execution of Johnny Baskin at Lucasville on Thursday morning. Then came to Columbus to lobby their state representatives and senators and present the governor with a petition asking for the abolishment of the death penalty. I commend them for putting their faith into action. Let's join Illinois, which last week became the 16th state to abolish the death penalty. Next is my lead co-sponsor, Nickie Antonio.
Thanks, Ted. Good morning. My name is Nickie Antonio, and I'm the representative from the 13th House District in Cuyahoga County. I'm honored and proud to stand with Representative Ted Celeste and jointly sponsor this legislation. The criminal justice system is not infallible. Because of DNA evidence and further investigation of criminal cases, the Death Penalty Information Center says 5 innocent people have been freed from Ohio's death row without anyone present. Cuyahoga County is one of 5 counties with death row inmates, where a crime occurs in Ohio can play a significant role in the nature of the crime. The Death Penalty Information Center reports 60% of Ohio counties have no residents on death row. No residents on death row in 60% of the counties. More than half 56% of the death row population comes from just 5 counties: Hamilton, Cuyahoga, Franklin, Lucas, and Sumner, with Cuyahoga County as the highest in capital indictments. That, my friends, is very significant. Not one execution in the state of Ohio has ever brought back the life of a beloved victim, nor healed the pain of their loss. And so today we join with Justice Paul Pfeiffer, a senior justice of the Ohio Supreme Court, and many others in calling for the sentence reform and an end to the death penalty in the state of Ohio. We ask our fellow lawmakers to support this legislation, to execute justice and not people, and stop state-sanctioned killing. And rather than execute one more person, we should institute a standard of life in prison without parole, which is fitting and humane for those convicted of murder. In a civilized society, we should not support the killing of an individual by judge or jury, and certainly not the state of Ohio executing her citizens. Now is the time for the state of Ohio to take the compassionate, pragmatic, and economically prudent step to abolish capital punishment. Now is the time to cease capital punishment in Ohio in an effort to execute justice, not Ohioans. Thank you. And I'd like to introduce Kevin Werner, who is the Executive Director of Ohioans to Stop Executions. Kevin.
Good morning. My name is Kevin Werner. I'm the Executive Director of Ohioans to Stop Executions. I thank Representative Ted Celeste and Representative Nickie Antonio, who are co-sponsoring this very important bill. In the 30 years since Ohio's death penalty law was enacted, it has become clear that a law whose intention was to protect our society and bring justice for victims' families has failed us. The death penalty law has caused pain and heartache for the families whose loved ones have been murdered. It has led to unthinkable suffering for the men who have been wrongfully convicted. It is a broken, biased system that has cost Ohio taxpayers millions of dollars. Murder victims' family members like Melinda Dawson need the very best that we can provide for them. They need healing and they need to grieve for the loss of their loved one. What they do not need is decades of re-traumatizing court proceedings, media attention, and to relive over and over again what is most certainly the worst day of their lives. Families who have lost loved ones should not be suffering in silence. They need justice that is swift and certain. The death penalty offers neither justice nor certainty. Ohio has freed 5 men from death row, 2 of whom, Dale Johnston and Derek Jameson, are with us this morning. Collectively, those 5 innocent men spent more than 57 years in prison for crimes they did not commit. When the wrong person is convicted, as happened in these cases, dangerous criminals go free, making our communities less safe. For those who are falsely convicted in capital cases, a wrongful conviction can have irreversible consequences. There is a significant disparity in the application of the death penalty with respect to victim characteristics and geographic location. Nearly 2/3 of death row inmates are convicted for the murder of Caucasian victims, while about 1/3 were convicted for the murder of African American victims. 60% of Ohio counties have 0 death row inmates. Over half of the people on Ohio's death row come from just 5 counties. Where a crime occurs absolutely plays a significant role in the nature of the crime, in the final outcome of who lives and who dies. These facts should give us great pause regarding the fairness and the accuracy of Ohio's death penalty system. Finally, with our great state facing an enormous budget shortfall, we should seriously consider whether the death penalty is the best use of taxpayer dollars. We all share the common goal of keeping communities safe and ensuring the effectiveness, efficiency, and fairness of our justice system. We can best meet these goals by eliminating wasteful spending on the death penalty and redirecting resources toward more effective policies and programs. Today is an enormous day of opportunity. Today begins a thoughtful discussion around how to build a fairer, more equitable, and more efficient justice system. Eliminating the death penalty will allow us to better serve murder victims' family members, will guarantee that we never execute an innocent person, and it will free up precious resources to better support the law enforcement community in their efforts to keep Ohio communities safe. Next, I'd like to introduce Dale Johnston.
Good morning. I would like to ask that all of Ohio legislators, the Ohio government, regardless of their personal beliefs, listen to what the governor of Illinois said. Quote, "There is no way to design the perfect death penalty system free from the numerous flaws that can lead to wrongful convictions. Even when the police, sheriff, prosecutors all work ethically and honestly, mistakes are made. Then when unethical prosecutors, sheriff officers, and local police take it upon themselves to railroad a person, as was done with me, wrongful convictions take place. I spent 5 years behind bars, or 7 years behind bars, 5 years on death row. I lost everything: home, farm, business, family members, destroyed financially, physically, emotionally, my reputation destroyed. Perhaps one of the more painful parts of this, my daughter's death could have been resolved within weeks of her death. People came forward telling the police and the sheriff that they all believed John Scott was involved in the kid's death. Even his wife said she believed he killed the kids. The authorities disregarded all this evidence. Had they investigated Lynch Scott, they would have found him at night, and the murder would have been resolved. Not only that, but the kids that were night molested in the years he was protected by the authorities would not have suffered the pain and the hurt they endured. The responsibility of the court system is to protect the citizens of Ohio from harm by unlawful people who disregard the law. There was a time when the death penalty was perhaps the only way to protect the citizens from Ohio from future harm. This is no longer true. Life with no chance of parole now protects the citizens of Ohio from harm. The death penalty is now an act of emotion and vengeance. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Gary Johnston, and I am a survivor of Ohio death row. I was wrongfully convicted in 1985 for a crime I did not commit. It was nearly 20 years from the time I was sentenced to death to the day I went home in 2005. I thank God for each day I have because it gives me an opportunity to tell my story. And I am a victim of what happened when our justice system makes mistakes. And in my case, investigators intentionally held back evidence that would have shown I was innocent. Eyewitnesses consistently told police I was not the man that they saw from the beginning of my case. And I feel the police and the investigators and the prosecutors were wrong for what they did to me. And I think they tried to railroad me, and I was convicted. I was offered a plea deal, but I refused to take it because I couldn't confess to something that I didn't do at the time. And my family and friends were very upset with me because I wouldn't do the plea deal. And I couldn't take the plea deal because I would have been saying I was involved with a crime. that was not right. I am not the only one who suffered because of what happened to me. I lost my mom and my father while I was on death row for something that I didn't do. And I honestly think the stress of what happened to me was what cut short my mom and dad's lives. The struggle, the emotion, and the pain of seeing your child put on death row for a crime that they didn't do. Can you imagine that happening to one of your family members? And can you imagine what that would be like to do your family, people that you love, for what most people say they can't imagine? That was my life, and this is my story. And it's time people in Ohio to know that there are innocent people like me on death row. I am so proud to be here today. I know that if it wasn't for my attorney, Mr. John Gilligan, and others who supported me, I would probably not be here today. By now, I might have been executed already, or I might have been one of the guys that has a date to be executed this year. And I want to thank Representative Celeste and Representative Antonio for bringing this to the attention of the people of Ohio. Thank the other death row exonerees who have become my friends, and Witness to Innocence, the organization for the exonerees, for all the love and support over the years. I am proud to have spoken around the country and overseas about the death penalty, but really need for my home state of Ohio, which condemned me to death, to hear me out. I think it is time for us to have a conversation about the death penalty, and I think more of our state leaders should take this issue much more seriously. Even after I have been finally shown to be innocent, Ohio still won't tell the truth. As for my buddy Freddie Pitt, the president of Witness to Innocence, he's from Florida, says, you can free an innocent man from prison, but you can't free him from the grave. Ohio, it's time to do what's right and end the death penalty. Thank you very much.
Hello. My name is Melinda Dawson. I'm the former wife of Clarence Elkins, the wrongfully convicted man for the murder of my mother. But more importantly, I'm her daughter, Judith Johnston's daughter. She was murdered in 1998. My 6-year-old niece was with my mom that night and was brutally attacked and left for dead. My niece at the time said she thought it looked like her uncle. It sounded like her uncle, who was my husband at the time. They convicted Clarence, and he was looking at the death penalty. The jury opted to give him a lesser sentence. But as a family, we were faced with the knowledge that he could be executed for this. Someone who's innocent was going to be sent to death row. My sons were 12 and 15. And I had to deal with this, that their father could be executed for something that he didn't do. It took me 7.5 years to prove Clarence's innocence. We found out that the person who actually murdered my mother was in the same prison pod as Clarence. And Clarence snuck a cigarette butt out of that prison and confirmed through DNA that Earl Mann was the actual murderer of my mother. Clarence was exonerated December 15th, 2005. It took an additional 2.5 years to have Earl Mann convicted who confessed to this crime if we would take the death penalty off of the table. I'm here today because I have always supported the fact that the death penalty was wrong, long before Clarence was ever convicted or even faced the death penalty. Something within me said, this is not right. But when I had to face it, that my husband could be executed for a crime he didn't commit, that made it even more so for me that it was wrong. And when the time came to make a decision with the prosecutors to take the death penalty off the table for Earl Mann in return for full confession, it wasn't hard for me. It was hard for my family. My family still believes in the death penalty. I do not, however. Right now, Earl Mann has been sentenced to life, and that has been my closure. If I would have had to face this another 10, 12, 15 years, I couldn't have done it. In closing, I just want to say that life is precious, regardless of the circumstances. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Jim Tobin. I am an Associate Director with the Catholic Conference of Ohio. On behalf of the Catholic Bishops of Ohio, I'm pleased to offer our conference's wholehearted support for legislative efforts to end the death penalty in Ohio. We too thank Representative Celeste, Representative Antonio, and the other co-sponsors of this legislation for having the political courage to pursue such an important yet difficult life issue. Murder rightly evokes moral outrage and a call for justice. Justice should reflect the seriousness of the offense, seek restoration for the offense, and protect society. The Catholic community, like so many other faith communities, such as the Ohio Council of Churches, the Ohio Jewish Federation, believes that justice can occur without resorting to the death penalty. This February, the Ohio Catholic Bishops issued a statement affirming our church's teaching that the death penalty should no longer be used. It stressed our deep conviction that all human life has value and dignity, even the life of the worst offender. This statement also affirmed the challenge given by Justice Pfeiffer and former Correction Director Terry Collins. This challenge called upon our legislative leaders to seriously debate whether or not Ohio should have the death penalty. There are better ways to protect society. We hope and pray that this legislation, as well as the recent ending of the death penalty in Illinois, will be the catalyst for such a debate. In other states and countries, life imprisonment has shown itself to be a fair, safe, and effective alternative. Unlike the death penalty, life imprisonment better responds to the imperfections, such as those that we have heard here, in the human justice, and allows time for mistakes to be corrected. We encourage legislative leaders to pursue extensive hearings on this bill. We look forward to the day when the death penalty is only remembered as part of Ohio's history. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim, and thank you to everyone who is here. And at this point, we're happy to answer any questions. I think everybody here is available if you have any questions.
Have you done any cost analysis to see how much this might save in prosecution costs if there were to be an elimination of the death penalty?
Kevin's organization has looked at this a little bit.
I'm sorry, where did the question come from?
How much money could Ohio Ohio say got rid of the death penalty?
Ohio has never conducted a comprehensive cost study. So what we are forced to do is to look at comparable states who have examined the death penalty. Those costs range from $137 million a year above and beyond what a life without parole sentence would cost in Florida, or rather in California, to $51 million a year more in Florida. The most conservative estimate is that of North Carolina. Those cost figures were $2.16 million more per execution. That was done in 1993, so those costs are likely understated. But when you apply even a very conservative number to Ohio's current death row population, hundreds of millions of dollars is what we're talking about. But the state has never done an actual accounting of its own costs for this system.
Hundreds of millions could be saved each year?
That's what the reports have indicated from other states. So we assume that Ohio would also save money above and beyond what the costs of life without parole are, or the death penalty rather.
Are those costs and appeals, and is the court, I mean, where are the cost savings?
What I'm going to do is I'm going to cite the report and make that available. It's a 2009 report done by the Death Penalty Information Center. I'd rather that you get the facts from that report than any misspeaking that I made you.
You've got a all-Republican legislature. The governor so far allowed 2 executions to go forward and hasn't seemed to say anything about any opposition. You know, Shirley Smith tried study bills and moratorium bills 4 sessions in a row. What possible chances do you think your bill has? And is there anything that you think could change the minds of the legislature at this point?
I think there's an interesting dynamic that's been at work. Part of it is Justice Pfeiffer's comments and his change in outlook in this, the recent publication of Jim Petro's book, Wrongful Conviction, Terry Collins' comments, and the issue of money. And it's one of the reasons we're doing this now. It is really a money issue as well. And interestingly enough, I've had several Republican legislators say that they are willing to consider this because of that. We do have 2 Republican co-sponsors on the bill. We are looking for additional people to sign up. But part of the process will be to be able to, as Kevin and others talked about, be able to tell the story and have the debate and have it in a civil way that we can really tell the story about why this should change. And I think we have an opportunity. I think there's a sense out there, and you've certainly looked at this a lot, there's a sense, I believe, that given the alternative of life without a chance of parole, that's what people would prefer. And I think that's an important message to get across.
I'd also like to address the fact that all of the facts that Representative Celeste just talked about, adding to this, I don't believe that this is a Republican or a Democratic issue. This is an issue about fairness, this is an issue about cost saving, and it's also an issue about humanity. And the humane way that our state deals with folks who have been convicted of murder. And as Ms. Dawson so eloquently pointed out, we need to take a look at the cost of what those long processes do to the families of the victims as well as the families of people who have been convicted. So I don't believe it's a Republican or a Democratic issue. And I know you're also aware we have a lot of new folks in the legislature. So I think it's a good time to have that discussion with all of us at this point in time.
Is there an emotional savings for the families of victims? For instance, if someone's put on death, or if someone's put life in prison instead of death row, do they continually have the appeals for parole coming back like they would if they were?
our case, because Earl Mann had confessed, there's no appeal, there's no, I mean, the case is done. I would have to say, and I was talking to my husband about this on the way here, that when they're sentenced to death row, you have 10, 12, 15 years that you're going to have to deal with the appeals and it coming back up and up. If a person is convicted by a jury, they certainly have a right to appeal, whether they are convicted with the death penalty or not, but the process does not carry on. The appeal process does not carry on as long as the capital murder punishment would be. So there's a sense of closure for the family once that determination is made, guilty or not, life in prison. That's a closure for the family. And I think that people miss that point. You know, being a victim of this myself and dealing with, you know, of course our case is unique. Not everybody has to go through what we had to go through. But the human element is people want revenge when something like this happens. I'm certainly guilty of it. That was my mother that was murdered. And through the years, I've learned to try to forgive this person who did this. And I don't think that somebody, a family member that's facing that person being on death row, they never get to that point. It takes years and years. And so the bottom line is, I know I've gone over what you've asked, but the process is much shorter, and there's closure, and immediate closure.